Welcome back, sci-fi fans, to the Science Fictionary Podcast. I'm Andrew, and coming from further away than usual is Marisha is here, and happy to have again joining us to talk Rings of Power. We've got Lunar Girl and Dragon Buddy.
Hi,
Thanks,
friends.
thanks again for being here, y'all.
Thanks.
Um,
Happy to be here.
we'll see who else appears in the chat. I'm noticing a trend where a lot of our fellow Red Fivers, anyway, seem to be getting behind on this show,
Yeah.
and I'm not sure. Like, I don't know if they're not into it or if they're just not
Mhm.
finding time to watch hour-long episodes. But
Right.
um,
This
Not used to hour-long episodes of anything.
right.
right.
So this was episode 4. I think I've been pretty solid on that. I have liked this show. I've liked each episode more than the last.
Yes.
The first one, I liked the first episode, but it is slow. I will readily admit that it was slow. It was a lot of introductions in the first episode, but they were smart to give us the first 2 together. But I feel like it's finally hitting a stride now, where there is a lot going on and a lot of stuff being introduced. So let's jump right in. And Dragon Buddy, like, what did you think? Just general thought on the episode.
General thoughts. We're hitting the ground running now. The first, I really enjoyed the first 2 episodes. A lot of world building that I didn't find boring, but I could see how others would.
Yeah.
Last week's episode was the best, and now it's been replaced by this week's episode. A lot of action, a lot of stuff going on. Very enjoyable.
What about you, Lunar Girl?
I loved it. It just totally sucked me right in. It was less focusing on the beauty of everything, like the first few episodes, and more into the nitty-gritty of the story. Things are going down now, and I'm like, wow, we have 4 episodes left. How is this going to finish,
Right.
So
there weren't as many big sweeping shots, but there are still some really beautiful shots in this episode. And if there's nothing else about this show so far, it is a huge step forward in what TV can look like.
It's everything that we haven't been getting in certain other fandoms.
Yeah. Although I think I'm hearing that may be changing with Andor this week.
Right.
I'm hearing really good things about the looks.
I'm
hearing really good things about everything on that show. Because they showed people the first 4 episodes the other day.
Yeah.
Which is exciting.
Yeah. All right, Marisha, what are your general thoughts on episode 4?
So my complaints about the last episode, right, episode 3, was I don't care. I want to see more of Numenor and the dwarves. And so what do we get in this episode? Numenor and the dwarves. So
yeah.
We didn't go see the Harfoots at all. And I don't hate the Harfoots. I just think they're notably less interesting than the other things going on.
True.
Yeah.
So, hey now. Rose said he can't, so he's leaving. See how it. But no, I really was. It was all the things that I was most excited about in this show. We got to see in this episode. So, that's always a win as far as I'm concerned. We got to see a lot more of Numenor. We got to see a lot more of kind of what's going on with the elves, and the conflict with the elves and the Numenorians, and all these things are kind of going on. And of course, we know where all that's headed, but it's still really interesting to see them kind of flesh out the inner workings of it.
Yeah, for sure.
Like the dwarves mining the mithril. I was like, oh, so that's how they do that. So I was kind of putting things together with the little things I do know. It was exciting for me.
Yeah.
But I'm loving I'm just liking the characters more with each episode. They're Galadriel is great, and I know there are people that have issues with that character, but if she wasn't a badass, they'd have a problem with it too. And I'm really, really liking Durin and Disa.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
And I'm liking the relationship with Elrond.
It was one of my favorite parts.
Yeah, I specifically like when they're kind of like everybody breathes a sigh of relief. The four miners all survive, and so then Disa kind of loosens the conversation up by asking Elrond to tell them about how they met. And that was all really, really great. Because then we finally get to see Elrond and Durin without the baggage that they've both been carrying around, like kind of this tension between them. And I think that's going to be a really fun relationship going forward.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But there's absolutely so much in this episode. I'm not even really sure where to start. So I'm just going to kind of pick a spot, and I want to talk about Adar.
Yeah.
Or at least Adar as what the orcs are calling him. Apparently that's not his name.
Right.
Because I didn't bother to go look it up, but it's the Quenya word for father.
Right.
And he's an elf.
He is an elf.
He's an elf. He is what is being portrayed as a fallen elf, which is not something we have really had in Tolkien. It's the only corrupted elves were orcs. We've heard about them, but they've never really been fleshed out as something to worry about.
Right. Yeah, we've heard about elves that were tortured and twisted by Melkor, but we've never seen them. We don't know anything about them. Yeah. And the thing that I'm finding really interesting about this character, I'm still really curious. I think he's going to be an elf, possibly, that we know, and I think that he might actually be one of the sons of Fëanor.
Right.
Because that was all really tragic, and there's a couple of them that we don't know exactly. We think they died, but we don't know exactly how. They just kind of disappear from the story.
One of the Fëanor, though, like an alliance with Sauron, I mean, they hate Melkor more than anyone.
It's possible, but you have to remember several of them towards the end finally speak against their father, who turns on them before his death. So it's not a pretty end for anybody there. And so it may not be, but I think the one thing really of note about this character is that the symbol on his clothing is the exact same symbol that is on Gil-galad's.
Maybe he's what about, is it Eöl, who's Meglin's father, the king of Gondolin?
Yeah.
The dark elf, right?
He would probably be the son, the son of the dark elf. He's the one that eventually, he's the one that eventually betrays them to Melkor.
So like in the Silmarillion, he does die in the downfall of Gondolin, but that would be interesting.
Yeah.
He's actually a Noldor. He's got ties to.
He's from Barrowland. He's from Barrowland. So there's a good possibility that they didn't give us his name right off because we know him, or people who know the lore will know him.
Right. And he's definitely not Sauron.
No.
He's not fair seeming enough to be Sauron.
So I don't think we've met Sauron yet, but I do have some new thoughts on what's going on because. Well, I'll give everybody else a chance real quick. Like, what did you think about this character? There's some before I was about to skip ahead, but Lunar Girl, what did you think about Adar?
The thing that has me hanging is that when he was talking to the other elf, how he said, lies have been told so many times that even the trees and their roots believe them. And I'm like, oh, what is going on in the elfie world? That he thinks lies have been told so many times. So I'm very curious to see where that goes.
Yeah. Which is why I think Marisha's theory is probably pretty sound, because there's some pretty deep animosity between those characters and the Noldor.
Mm-hmm. That would make sense. Yeah.
Right.
What about you, Dragon Buddy? Any particular thoughts on Adar?
Same thing. It's that almost not an evil character, but more of like the anti-hero. Is what he seems to be playing, which makes sense when it comes to Sauron. He mixed words with all the races to turn them. So seeing that kind of fleshed out in another character is pretty wild. Even if he's just a show character, I really like the storyline so far.
He's a true believer.
Yes.
Well, yeah. But some of the things he says, do you think he is fully in league with Sauron, or do you think that he's someone that thinks that he's filling this void, this vacuum himself? That maybe it was Sauron that he, in disguise, another disguise that kind of filled his head with the nonsense, just like he's going to do to the Númenóreans later. That he thinks that he is going to fill this role, that this vacuum left by Melkor.
He did say yet, didn't he? Say I'm not him.
No, he says,
I'm not a god.
I'm not a god, not yet.
Yes,
not yet.
And so whether that's something, there's this kind of running theme that we should see this with the Númenóreans as well, if they kind of stay with the lore, is that they kind of start to believe that the Valar aren't anything special. They're just beings like us who basically seized this power for themselves.
Right.
And refused to share.
And they're going to take it, and that they can take it. And so we kind of see the Númenóreans attempt the same thing at some point, at least in Tolkien's writings. So that's why I kind of wonder if this is someone that's either been made this promise of becoming a god, like a Valar, by Sauron, or it's someone that legitimately thinks that he can be this, that he was left in the vacuum, that I think that he is one of these elves possibly twisted by Melkor, and that now he's going to pick up the mantle his own self.
Right.
What if he's waiting to see if like Sauron makes him like, I don't know, like an orc general or something? Is that possible in the storyline?
Well, I think everybody's being twisted to believe that, Melkor Morgoth is gone. And, we've all retreated back, but where we go from here, I think that's being twisted by Sauron to anybody, that he's going to twist it a certain way for the men of, you're going to twist it a certain way for the elves. And he plays off of their fears, their strengths, into, where they trust him. And I think we're seeing that first with Adar, whoever he may become, is that he's the first one to basically believe in the lies of Sauron.
That makes sense.
What do you think? What do y'all think about the fact that they are calling him father? Because Arondir asks and he doesn't really answer him. And we've always been told, but never 100% for sure. It was kind of one of those things that Tolkien always approached as kind of a lost myth about, well, maybe the orcs, we don't have another creation story, so maybe they're the descendants of twisted elves.
Yeah, that's where it's basically they tried. Well, they hint around that Melkor brought the elves back and twisted them and tortured them into a new race of being, and maybe he is one of these OG elves that spawned the orc.
Based on who we think he may be, he's old enough to theoretically be, one of the fathers of the race of orcs.
Right.
Right.
Because, of course, one of the more tragic things that Tolkien ever wrote about was these beings, the elves being twisted that way.
Right. Interesting.
But I think there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on there, and I thought the actor did a phenomenal job.
Is there going to be a season 2?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
We're supposed to get 5.
Oh, good. That's what I thought. But
they have been selling this as a 50-hour project.
Right.
So this first season only has 8 episodes, so I don't know where those extra hours are going to come in. I just figured the last season will be longer.
Right.
Is what I kind of expect that to be. But they've been telling us, and they're still telling us, 50 hours of content.
Oh, good.
So yeah, we've got a lot to go. Now I haven't heard anything about whether they've started filming season 2, but I know I had heard a lot of pre-production stuff. So
yeah, that's all
I don't know. But I'm hoping that we're going to get season 2 next year and not have to wait like 18 months or 24 months.
I know.
I think that a show like this that has kind of been met with opposition for just being what it is really needs to maintain momentum.
They got to stay on point in order to stay relevant, I would say. They fall off track. The people that hate this show are going to be all over it quick.
Oh yeah, no, they need to keep momentum and keep those people quieted down. And I'm really I want this to be super successful because I want to see other things. I want to see a standalone series, a Beren and Luthien series, or even an Arendelle series, or there's all kinds of really cool characters that we could just get, one-off seasons on. I mean,
show me the dwarves. Just give me the dwarves.
So I mean, there's so much stuff, and a lot of the future of that's really going to depend on how this one does. But I think it's. Go ahead, Marisha.
And I said, not to mention, I want Netflix to eventually do something with Narnia.
Ooh.
Like this being successful on, a big fantasy property being successful in a streaming service makes that more likely.
Yeah. And I kind of think maybe that's what Netflix is theoretically already building towards. And and I think what's taking so long is they weren't looking to just do a series. They're looking to do like this whole immersive universe in C.S. Lewis's world. So I think that's taking them some time to work out exactly how to do it. But I highly suspect that they're watching how this one goes, because they're going to be met with the same sort of obstacles, especially with C.S. A lot of people, like you can read Tolkien, and if you're not versed in Christianity, you can miss the the nuances and the references. You can't miss them in Narnia. They're pointed. So it's going, if a studio decides to make Narnia, and it's going to get attacked just as bad as this, if not worse. Without anybody ever seeing it, they're going to go nuts over it. But so Adar was great. It wasn't a letdown. When you tease the end of an episode with a character like that, you really hope that carries through, and I thought it did. I thought that was a really great conversation there.
And they let him go. They let I can't remember his name. Aaron. I just call him Aaron. They let him go. Like he let him go, and he's like, "Go give them a message." But the orcs were still hunting him. But did you forget to tell your dudes not to shoot at him? That he has to be a messenger. But
So it's all very interesting, and that was kind of one of the things they do. He does let him go. He doesn't just let him go. He gives him his weapons back.
Yeah. So it showed like a softness towards elves who don't know. It's like, you're an elf like me, but you don't know. you will know, but you don't know right now. But this is what I'm doing, so tell them to get out.
Yeah,
You
so
know,
it's an interesting thing, and you can look at it. I mean, until we know more about Adar, it's hard to really know. But like, if these orcs are his descendants, then you can see like why he would choose to want to try to be their leader. And we don't know exactly what his purposes would be for them at this point.
Right.
So it's interesting, but I think that my suspicion is that he doesn't know that Sauron is still around, but that Sauron is whispering in his ear and using him to build this army.
Right.
Wow. I do like the way this show has brought us a new, especially on the screen, a new version of orcs, a side that we don't see to them, with their, reverence for Adar, and that moment where you have that one orc lying there almost dead and getting that excuse me, that release, that almost compassion from Adar to finish him off. Very strange to see, and it kind of has me like I'm locked in. Like this is interesting. I didn't expect this.
Yeah. No, cool. It makes you, even if only briefly, look at the orcs a little bit differently. That they're born with this twisted, and locked into this view of the world. They don't really get a choice here. This is they're born for a purpose, and so it's interesting. So let's move over and talk about the stuff on Numenor.
Right. Wow. Wow.
So what did y'all think? Like,
heavy.
Yeah. There's
so
a lot.
Heavy.
There's a lot going on in Numenor. Now, this is where I'm gonna go ahead and get this out of the way. This is my one, and I don't know. At this point, it's a nitpick because I don't really know. You just seem to have people intentionally sowing discord among the people in Numenor, and this isn't exactly the way that Numenor falls. So I don't know what the purpose is at this point, and maybe, but this whole they took our jobs, stick that they had going.
The same thing the first time we watched it. The same word. I'm like, ooh.
Yeah, it's this now. Granted, that is. It's real easy for me to look at that and say, you promised us no real world parallels,
right?
But you did it anyway. But as I stop and think about it, I stop and go, that kind of story has been used through all time to turn one group against another. It's not. That's not just unique to right now.
Right. Yeah. That's the act of sedition has been going on since forever.
So I am curious what's going on. I do think. Well, so that's my one gripe. So I'm going to give y'all a second and let y'all talk. I've got some more theories. I've got a new theory on Halbrand.
Okay.
But I'm going to give y'all a minute. Lunar Girl, I'll let you start. What did you think? What stood out to you in the Numenor arc in this episode?
I definitely don't like what I would equate to the Hand of the King. That guy with the silver and the sneaky devil beard. I don't like him. There's something about him I can't put my finger on, but I don't trust him.
Yeah, you shouldn't like him.
No, at all. Terrible person.
Once we saw the visions that the Queen Regent was seeing, like horrifying, like extremely horrifying, and I started like having a softening towards her. Like I started to like her. I felt sad for her, the compassion and the empathy, all of that stuff. Terrifying, seeing those massive tidal waves destroying their entire island. Like, wow. The daughter of the naval chief, I'm not.
Elendil.
Yes, yes.
And I keep blanking on her name because she's a created for this series
Yeah.
character, and I keep forgetting her name.
Even though she comes from a good family, like has the perfect dad and everything like that, I think that she can be swayed with peer pressure. So I think she's too impressionable. I see her doing a not so nice thing because she just seemed like, I don't know, like wishy-washy. So I don't
think
know
she
if
was a
can do
little
something.
swayed by his speech, which is
Yeah.
kind of what. But I'm curious. I'm real curious what they're doing there because one, she's a created character, so I don't really know what they intend to do with her.
Right.
Now, when they escape the island, Elendil and his two sons
Mhm.
are the ones that go to Middle Earth.
Right. Right.
So I don't know if they intend to do that with this character, but what I did find interesting was that his daughter is swayed by his, his words, with
Yeah.
his hollow words. His own son just says it's obnoxious. It's irritating.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, I think what they do with those two characters, I think they're both invented characters for this show.
Right.
But like where Pharazôn is going to ultimately be the one that's going to lead Numenor down the wrong road, and is his son going to end up on the other side of things, and Elendil is going to have the same thing where his daughter's going to be swayed to the wrong side, and we're going to kind of see these two fathers doing what they believe in and losing someone in the process.
Yeah.
And so I do think there's some interesting story to tell there. But yeah, I think there's some real signs that she's being swayed the wrong direction.
Yeah.
But it may be Pharazôn's own son that pulls her back.
Right. Right.
So I don't know. It's going to be interesting. And I'm curious. I'm real curious about the timeline on the Numenorian stuff, because there's some things that haven't really happened yet that need to happen before the fall of Numenor.
And who is the guy that keeps like trying to date her? Like, what does he have to do with the story?
That's Pharazôn's son.
Yes.
The sneaky guy with the beard? Oh, gotcha. That makes sense now.
So yeah, I mean, Pharazôn at some point, if they follow the lore, is probably going to force a marriage with Miriel.
Right.
Which is going to lead to a lot of really, really bad things. But I don't know. I'm not sure where they're going with that character, but I don't mind that. It's with the new characters, you kind of have concern of what they're going to do with them. But I think they are doing some interesting things. And as long as the characters are interesting and don't, like I said last week, as long as they don't start making up characters to take on things that our existing characters, our Tolkien written characters should be doing, then I have no problem. You have to add characters to flesh out the world. But Marisha, give you a chance to jump in here, since I know you're going to have to bail in a minute. What?
BYT just hopped in. Forced marriage. I thought that was the other show. Hi, Nicholas.
What did you think about all the Numenorian stuff?
So, I was kind of wondering like about the dynamics between Pharazôn and Miriel, because like at this point they actually seem to have pretty good rapport.
Yeah, we don't know. Like most versions of Miriel have her being one of the faithful. There is one version that doesn't, and they're still kind of. And I don't know if she's playing a long game of just trying to stay alive with Pharazôn or what. I don't know if she's just saying the right things to keep him from taking the power. That's the thing. This moment she starts saying things he doesn't want her to say, that's when he's going to seize power. So I suspect the speech at the end of this, in fact, she's fixing to sail away and leave him in charge.
Right.
And he's going to seize power while she's gone.
Yeah.
Because he's sailing, she's going to sail away with many of the faithful. Is what's about to happen.
Right.
Yeah. I think that it's really interesting. I'm really curious to see where they're going. Because like you said, they're not following the timeline exactly. And I do feel like we have to. I think we probably will meet Sauron sooner rather than later, just because. I mean, it's not like he just shows up in Numenor Falls the next day. Like there's it drags on for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All of that, and also I want to know where the other stones are. She says this is the only Palantir we have.
Yeah.
In the Silmarillion, they are all in Numenor.
I think they are. I think they are. I think that
Okay.
this is the only ones that the current rulers of Numenor have. I think the others are going to be in the city to the west, and I forget which city they're talking about. But Elendil, and then they keep talking about the city where they're from.
Right.
On the
Yes.
west of Numenor. That's where a lot of the faithful are.
Right.
So I think that's probably where the other the other six stones are.
Yeah.
But I was a little surprised that Muriel kind of did the about face and was like, no, we're gonna, stand with our ancient allies, kind of gave that rah-rah speech, because she was coming down pretty squarely on the other side of that.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's going to be what?
I was going to say, I do want to hear your Halbrand theory before I go.
Okay. Real quick, Dragon Buddy, anything particular stand out to you or anything big in the
No, I really think that the characters of Pharazon's son and Elendil's daughter, I think they might just be devices to show how, the divide between the faithful and those that become part of the doom of Numenor are split right even through families. I kind of get that feeling that that's where we're going with that. And I was amazed to see that Mithril was actually on the side of liking elves and wanting to fix the divide. I didn't see that coming. I thought she was going to be with Pharazon to push that. So that was a little bit of a surprise.
So we see a little bit of Halbrand in this episode, not a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of towards the end of the episode, we see him walking free in the city.
Yeah.
I think that he has been talking. We see him alone with Pharazon, and and then we don't get to hear the conversation. It cuts away. And then we see him walking free in the city. I don't think he's Sauron, but I think he's an emissary.
Okay.
We know that part of what leads to the downfall of Numenor is the worship of Morgoth, of Melkor.
Mm-hmm.
And I really think that he's going to be the one, because we don't see the signs yet that there's Melkor worship happening.
Right.
Melkor's tower there hadn't been a tower built. Sauron will eventually come, but theoretically when Sauron comes, he should come with the ring already.
Right.
So I think that he's there. I think that he's still loyal to Sauron, and that he's there to shift the culture towards worshiping a different Valar.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
They don't. The one thing they haven't really touched on is that the Numenorians don't actually worship the Valar. They revere the Valar. The only temple on the island is to
Eru.
Iluvatar is the only temple on the island, because he's the only he's the one that
he is God. Yeah.
Right.
So I think that I may be totally off, but I really think, because there doesn't seem to be any indication at this point that he's leaving with Galadriel.
Right.
Yeah.
No. He intends to stay.
Mm-hmm.
So,
they did make it a point to tell you he knows every single person in the city.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then they showed how much sway he has over everybody. So, I don't trust him.
Yeah. No, he doesn't very trustworthy. And on that note, I'm going to have to cut.
Bye, Marisha.
All right.
Bye.
Sorry I didn't get to say the whole time, love. Next
That's
time.
okay.
We'll see y'all later.
next time.
Yeah.
Bye.
Just leave that there. Or... Man, last time I went live on a Sunday afternoon, I had all kinds of people in the chat. But
Right.
We are glad you're here, Nicholas. Are you actually watching the show, Nicholas? So anything else in Numenor? I mean, the city is beautiful. They did a really fantastic job. Now that's one of the biggest practical sets they built was Numenor. It shows.
Yeah.
The tree, always the tree. The tree's losing its blossoms, and they're saying it's like the tears of the Valar. And like I could imagine that. I can see that. The talk that Galadriel had with the Queen Regent about, I know what it's like for nobody, to stand alone and nobody to believe you, stand with me. And I thought that was like really, like, wow, that was a powerful talk that the two of them had together. And the king seems like he's dying, and it's kind of sad, but I kind of want to know more about why. Yeah. I might end up reading this book before season 2 comes out.
But yeah, I mean, that king is one of the great kings of Numenor, and was very much among the faithful, the worshippers of Iluvatar, and loyal to the elves, and so yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how all of that plays out. I think they're doing a good job with it, though. They're not giving away too much too quick.
Yeah, they're not, and I enjoy that. I do like that.
Now, I don't know, at this point, I have too much trouble in my head remembering which book some of the stuff came from. So I don't know how much information about the fall of Numenor itself and how it happened is actually in the appendices. It seems like most of that's in the Silmarillion. Yeah. So I don't know how much they actually have. So I don't know if they're going to go into super detailed like religious shift and basically a declaration of war against the Valar, and I'm curious to see, because we're talking about a really wild event in the books as far as what happens. You're talking about an event that leads to Iluvatar basically opening a huge rift, entering Arda himself and creating this massive rift that swallows the island, and actually is such a violent event is the moment when Tolkien's world goes from a flat world to a round world.
Right. I was just going to say, it's a huge thing, because Iluvatar does not come into the realm to be a hands-on god. He created everything.
That's kind of the last event in Tolkien's history. It's eventually much like, this is one of the really Catholic things. Eventually God will enter the world himself and vanquish evil forever.
Right. 40 days, 40 nights of rain, kind of, fire and brimstone is what's basically going to happen to only a few are able to escape to Middle Earth, and that's about it. But an entire race of people wiped from the face of the earth.
Yeah, I think it's like basically, I think it's either 7 ships or 9 ships of the faithful.
Yeah,
and then a couple of ships of the unfaithful that become the Black Númenóreans, like the Mouth of Sauron and Return of the King is a Black Númenórean.
Right. I will say one of the nice pieces to take out of this one is Theo and the hilt that he has. First of all, Theo is going to be the end of a lot of people, because taking that thing back to where the orcs are and revealing it to an orc. Terrible decision.
Leave it to a teenager to think they know what they're doing and not listen to their mom.
Yeah.
But then coming back to what is it? Sirith? What city are we in? When he comes back, and to have the farm owner come up to him and reveal that he, talking about the servant and the faithful servant, and he is older, so you could put it to where he remembers that we worshipped Melkor, we worship Morgoth, we were his people, and Sauron, it was the faithful servant of them, of that god that we worship. So knowing that darkness is already within, it's pretty wild. It was a good touch.
Yeah, I really liked that scene with the tavern owner. And the thing is you realize, like, you stop and think back to the first episode when we first meet him. He's the only one that's even remotely acts friendly towards Arondir.
Right.
He was just deceiving him the whole time.
Right.
That these undercurrents of waiting for Melkor to return or for Sauron to come back, they never went away. They're still there. And it's a nice touch to kind of building how this is all going to go down. And but I think that I'm really curious what they're going to do with Theo.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, the show has a lot of direct misdirect going on as far as a follower of Tolkien's work. Who Sauron, we know he's in the mix, so they're playing off of people that know that about this character, where you see it pointed towards different directions. And when you think, well, it could be Halbrand, it could be there's another switcheroo. I mean, we're going to end up finding out that the old comet man, that meteor man that falls, is probably like Tom Bombadil or something. Go crazy with that. But there's just a lot of that to keep you guessing, and I'm enjoying it. I started playing Shadows of Mordor because that goes into a lot of lore.
They do a lot of really good lore in that game.
Yep, and a lot of little add-ins that they put into the first one is all about following, the spirit form of Celebrimbor with you and stuff, and so the show's really got me hungry to jump back into a lot of Tolkien's works, and Tolkien adjacent things. So
I'm gonna put this up on the screen. It may go in front of your face here for a moment, but I've seen a few who are positive who have been saying every episode there is more to overlook, and while none of it's a deal breaker, that it's adding up to be harder to ignore. I guess saying that there's more and more things that are not Tolkien that are, and I'll be honest, I don't think I agree with that.
No, you know what I think what people get lost in is that just because there's a time crunch does not mean it's it's forgetting lore. It's leaving lore behind. The same people that I've heard, complain about that time crunch and it changing lore are also complaining about how boring the show is. You want to talk about boring? Let's go to the pace. Well, at least the first few episodes, the first 3 episodes I've heard.
We're boring.
To lead up to that, we're talking, millennia. So we have to speed this up for the sake of getting a story in. We just hope that they don't speed up too many things like Numenor. We can't. There's some things that have to happen in order for it to truly make sense. The future of Numenor. So I'm hoping we don't get rushed in those departments.
I think there are a lot of people that are not very forgiving with how difficult this stuff is to adapt. That everybody thinks that they could do it, and even the great Stanley Kubrick said this stuff is unfilmable.
Right.
People forget that the Beatles wanted to make a version of the Lord of the Rings themselves, and they wanted Stanley Kubrick to direct it.
Right.
Mhm.
And he took one look at it and said, "This is not doable."
There's no way.
No.
But there is a way.
Right. And so
Um,
that's why what Peter Jackson pulled off was such an enormous thing, because
Huge.
he did what was
Mhm.
thought to be undoable. And
Right.
he
Really.
did it in a really difficult way. What he did was said, I'm going to take a bunch of people to New Zealand away from their families and homes for 3 years, and we're going to
Right.
make these movies. And that because of that, they had all kinds of actors that refused to do it.
Mhm.
They had several that went and then quit, several that went and then were
Hated
fired.
every minute of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was until it finally, it was almost a blessing in that it was such a difficult thing. The ones that enjoyed being there and being a part of it were the ones that ended up staying.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what made it such a great thing. But like, there's no way to do a 100% adaptation of
Mhm.
Yeah.
Tolkien's work, especially when we're talking about the appendices.
Oh,
It's
Yeah.
you're not talking about straight books. You know, you're talking about an outline of notes. 100 miles long. It's
Yeah.
essentially sitting in a machine with the dollar bills flying around you and trying to grab as many of them as you can to get out with to where it made it worthwhile. Because and you're not going to get it all. You're not going to bring all of the lore into it. So we hope that you bring the chunk of it, the good portion of what makes this, that can really make the storyline work. So,
Right.
yeah.
we're still a little cautious, but so far, I mean, I've wanted more at the end of every episode. So that's a good start.
And I mean, this is the thing, is like there's only one piece of fictional lore that I like more than Star Wars, and this is it.
Mhm.
This is my thing. And just to your comment, Nick, I don't think there's really anything in here that I'm just looking at and going, no, not Tolkien. Tolkien would never have done that.
Mhm.
I mean, there are little nitpicks in there, but like, those are largely things that have yet to play out. And so I kind of hesitate to say, well, no, that's not right, because the truth is, because of the way they're kind of slowly unfolding this thing, I don't really know. And I could criticize something right now. Some of my nitpicks, I could criticize them right now, and who knows? I could be totally off base. Little nitpicks, the Palantir, the Seeing Stones. I don't know that we ever have any reference to them being able to use to see visions of the future.
Mhm.
I was trying to go through some of the stuff to find out if that was lore or not.
Yeah.
It's certainly feasible.
Yeah. But we do also know that maybe it's because of who they are. We know that the Numenorians had the gift of foresight.
Mhm.
Right.
We can't forget that they do have elvish, blood. They're not,
right.
Strictly speaking, humans. So yeah, I have small nitpicks, but Nick, I'm gonna plug this channel again. I've seemed like I've plugged him every week on this, but if you're looking for lore and if you're looking for someone that knows way more of this lore, because best I can tell, this is just what he does for a living now.
Yeah.
Is Nerd of the Rings. That channel, that guy knows the lore inside and out, and he's going to be hard. Like, he's going to be tough on what they do, and he's going to critique it, but he always does it in a fair manner.
Absolutely.
And I would highly recommend, if you want to find somebody that knows as much about this lore as probably really anybody at this point. There's not a lot of people out there that I think know the lore as well as he does. I mean, there are a few people with, college professors who've dedicated their whole life to studying this stuff that may know more. But, as far as somebody that knows it and is going to be hard on it, but is going to be fair, check out his channel. Because frankly, there are some people that are deep into this lore that hated this show before it ever came out. And So I think having a knowledge of the lore, you know, being deep into the knowledge of it isn't necessarily like a bragging point for a YouTuber at this point, as far
Right.
as, you know, I know this lore, so you should listen to me. Like,
Right.
because frankly, there are some people that are just being particularly nasty about this whole thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Some of this stuff, I mean, okay, so you can take the thing that I find the most disgusting that I'm seeing from the YouTubers is particularly with Galadriel and Disa, where they're taking these two characters, and you can you search Rings of Power, scroll through those videos on YouTube, and you're going to see all of these manipulations of their face to make them look to make them look horrible. And thing is, you can freeze frame anybody talking on screen and get absolutely terrible looks. So that's not just these characters that you can do that, but I mean, the taking it and then photoshopping, manipulating their face, doing all sorts of terrible things, frankly has just reached a level of pure disgustingness and vileness, and with Disa in particular, a pretty nasty level of racism.
Yeah.
And
I was wondering if we can go back to that.
Throw around. I don't like to throw that accusation around, because there's nothing you can do to shove someone away faster than to say that they're a racist.
Right.
But I've seen some really nasty stuff on YouTube, just on big channels, and I don't know. It's kind of you know,
they take a lot of. I mean, we're all individuals. We all have our own individual politics. We all have identify ourselves in certain ways. So the actors and actresses for any show believe what they believe outside of a show, and I don't think you should take those politics, unless they're completely utterly disgusting, and you know, use that as a litmus test on whether you like character or not.
Right. Well, and that's kind of this thing. This is almost like the forest tree on Dagobah, right? Like, you know, what's in the tree? What will I find in there? And it's like what you take with you.
Right.
And that's the problem. That's what these people are finding in this show. Instead of enjoying this fantasy, this beautiful fantasy world,
right?
It's like they're screaming, "Don't bring your politics into it," but they're bringing theirs.
Yeah. It's amazing. There is a lot of that type of hypocrisy when it comes to fandoms in general. I mean, obviously, we're going to like what we want to like, and we're going to dislike what we're going to dislike. We're not all going to be the same. And you could be very critical of a show for something that you have a problem with, and by all means. But it's when you take these certain things to, especially the politics portion of it, is you want to call them the wokeness and this and that. When you're sitting there saying that they're putting their politics into, but you're overlaying your politics onto a show, and then you're matching it regardless of intent on the showrunner's parts or the director's part. You're overlaying your politics over top of it to see if it's if it's going against yours. And it's this is all about escapism. This is immersion into another world, into a wild world, and you're taking yourself out of it, and you're doing yourself an injustice if you're overlaying your politics, looking to see if they've interjected theirs.
I actually was wondering if we can go back to the dwarves for a minute.
Yeah, we really haven't even gone there yet, so we definitely
Oops. I shut off my thing. Hold on just a second. Talks amongst yourselves.
Nice touch of Elrond figuring out how to open up the secret door to Durin's little hideout. That's very reminiscent of the books. The rhymes and the jingles and stuff I was always fascinated reading the books that a man that could write this type of literature would interject his own goofy little songs for all the different races that were in Middle Earth.
How did he know that? Like, first guess. You know, he
Yeah, well,
sang the jingle
he
and
was
he
friends
thumped the
with Doran,
rocks.
and I guess this is why you don't teach children your passwords,
Right.
Oh,
because presumably younger Doran shared that. But I mean, we
right,
that's the thing. It's only been gone for 20 years. Doran was an adult last time they saw
Yeah.
each other. They were
right.
very close. And I think Elrond has made it pretty clear that he actually knows a lot um, about the dwarves' land, about everything, because he
Mhm.
knows when he hears them talking about the mine that they're working in, he knows right where it's in, below the
Right.
Mirror, which is really cool. Just a little Easter egg drop there is where Durin the first
Mhm.
enters the mountain.
Mhm.
Right, right, right.
So I think I think him and Durin were very close, and I think that he just knows an awful lot about how to get around
Right.
Khazad-dûm.
You know, the extended edition, you're going to see Elrond saying, "Only an idiot would keep that as a combination on his luggage."
What one of the things I wanted to ask, okay. In one scene, when Doran was about to show Elrond the mithril, you know, he told him to put his hand on the mountain and swear. And then in the second scene, when Disa was singing to the mountain to, you know, let the people who are in the dwarves that aren't dead to be saved. They obviously, like, I'm asking now, it seems like they think the rocks are a god or one of their
No,
gods
not
or
necessarily. So
up
I
a
mean,
mountain.
so a big part of that is so the dwarves essentially worship one. They worship
One of the
Iluvatar,
yeah.
but one of the Valar actually created the dwarves.
Right.
Wow.
Auli, right? The
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
And so they but part of that is especially the singing is she told us about that earlier, how they sing to be able to hear different
That harmonic resonance kind of thing.
to know where to dig, where not to dig, and
Yeah.
things like that. And though, but they have a great respect for the rock, for the
Right.
mountain itself. And so it's not so much that they worship it as much as they respect it.
Gotcha.
And it all goes back to the world was created by song
Yeah,
and music.
absolutely.
So
Okay, that makes a lot more
Yeah.
sense now.
If you've never read anything in the Silmarillion, and if you don't want to read it, the Silmarillion audiobook's actually on YouTube.
mhm.
Right.
And the first chapter is the creation story for Middle Earth, and it is
Mhm.
one of my favorite pieces of fantasy
Great.
literature out of everything. Like I just pick the book up occasionally
Mhm.
and read the creation story or listen
Right.
to it on YouTube because it's just really interesting.
I will have to start there. Another question was,
Well, real quick before you move on, though,
Yeah.
I do want to touch on the oath that Elrond
Yes.
says. One, he
Okay.
does swear it on the rock on the mountain.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But in Tolkien's world, oaths have real power.
Oh yes.
Like if you swear an oath, you're held to that oath. Breaking an oath in Tolkien's world
Mhm.
leads to very, very bad things.
Right. Well, he
So-
made it sound like, you know, basically you and all your spawn are going to be killed by Sauron if you break this oath, you know.
Yeah, no, it's and like I said, you know, oaths in this world bear weight.
Mhm.
They're not just words. Like you swear an oath in this world, and the world holds you to it.
Right. Right.
Which is kind of interesting that after the swearing of the oaths and the mountain tries to swallow 4 dwarves,
Mhm.
I don't think that's a coincidence there that you're seeing, you know,
Yeah.
that happen right after the oath.
Yeah.
Right.
Is Disha like, I know Doran is the prince and eventually will be the next dwarf king. Disha, I'm assuming, is a princess or will be queen. But is she also a priestess? Because the way she was singing and the way the rock was responding to her singing was absolutely beautiful and phenomenal. And, you know, to see her comforting the wives of the dwarves that are still trapped, you know, in the mines, it was amazing to see that. So I'm wondering, is she just assuming the roles of their next queen, or is she a princess, or is she a priestess?
So she's a created character. We really don't know who she is prior to marrying Durin.
Right.
We do get the indication that he first came to see her when she was singing.
Right.
So presumably, yes, some sort of, you know, priestess or something along those lines. I don't really, it's not something I don't think we have a lot of background on. But the whole thing about singing to the mountain and stuff is directly from Tolkien.
Oh, it's so beautiful. I love this story.
I think this is a really cool continuation of what Tolkien wrote. But as far as what her background is, or why she's assuming this role, I don't think it has to be her. I would assume that because she's married to the next king, that has this place of power and responsibility.
Right.
Would be my assumption about why she's kind of the leading that.
Right.
Plus, apparently, that's what she was raised to do.
Right.
So yeah, even though we don't have a fully fleshed out version of what that is, I would say it would be fair to compare it to some sort of priestess.
Right.
Yeah.
Gotcha. This is going to get me to finally read the Silmarillion. And if that's what it does to all of these new people and the next generation, then they're doing it right.
Yeah, and that's if I could wish for one thing from this series, that it would be when more people, a new generation, would discover Tolkien's writing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And I think that's what will happen.
It's the same as like with people with the Harry Potter movies. Great movies. Yeah. A lot of people turned around and picked up the book after the fact, and then they realized, like, from like book 3 on, half the book doesn't even make the movie,
and they couldn't possibly make the movie. Like, there was that understanding.
So
there would have to be like 3 more movies if they were to include every single thing from the book, which is why I don't understand why, you know, we were talking about that the other day.
I do find it interesting that I'm liking this more than another Amazon show, which I felt did injustice to the storyline, which was The Wheel of Time. Love the Wheel of Time books. Hate the show. I gave up after, I think, episode 4, because it had changed so much. In order to give them their own storyline instead of truly following what the story of the books were. So, you know, maybe they learned. Or it was just these streaming services do go off of different people and different showrunners to create something for them, and I think you have a better chance of seeing a hit and a miss on shows close together in production, just because of that.
Right.
Yeah. Another thing that I really loved from these scenes, because it made me look at Elrond in a way that I've never really looked at the character. Was when he talks about his father, Eärendil the Mariner, whose father is basically granted this this status. He's a star. He carries this star across the sky every day,
right.
And in some of the abandoned apocalyptic writings, will return during the last battle to fight Melkor.
Right.
So you've got this great man, but it's like, you know, he's talking about the moments of wisdom from several angles in this episode were really, really great. But I really like when he's talking to Durin. Durin's upset with his father, and he says, you know, look, you know, I spent most of my life wondering what my father would think. Like, you know, did I carry his name well? Am I a failure? And then one day I just realized that, you know, to hear any judgment from my father would be a blessing. And it calms him down. But we see a really cool side of Elrond here. Elrond isn't mad about Disa lying to him.
Right.
And Elrond says, "You were loyal to my friend. That's all I can ask."
Right.
So, that was one of the concerns with this show was that Elrond would kind of take a back seat to a lot of what's going on, and I don't think they're doing that. I think that he's always kind of been known as one of the wisest of the elves, and they're really showing that with him, where he's having these big moments where he gets to be the voice of reason.
And he's so relatable as a character. Like,
yeah,
everything that he does, you could tie that into everyday life. He's just so relatable.
And it's interesting. I saw somebody pointed out earlier, knowing when you really start thinking about Elrond's backstory, it's actually fairly tragic. Like he loses his mother and father. His brother opts, because they're given after they sail to the Undying Lands. There's this whole deal with Elrond's family where they have to choose. That the children have to choose whether to live a mortal life. This is what's going on with Arwen and Lord of the Rings, is they have to choose whether to live a mortal life or a life, an immortal life as an elf. They basically can choose whether to be man or elf. So Elrond is actually more by blood, more man, more human than he is elf.
Right.
But because of his decision, he is all elf.
Right.
So it's very interesting. But he lost. So his brother chooses a mortal life. His brother is the founder of Numenor. So he loses his brother. He loses. It's a lot of loss. And then when you read about Elrond in the Silmarillion, the appendices, the thing that always stands out is when visitors come to Rivendell, there's so much warmth and caring and love given to the guests, and then you realize that that's all coming out of this place of Elrond trying to create a place of comfort for people that come to him.
For everyone.
When the one prince was talking to Elrond, and Elrond, and he was telling him, about his father. And, I just thought about it right now. I've never thought about it before, but your father said this. And it was just matter of fact that you're going to be taking care of his things someday. And it was just, again, relatable. Like, all of this stuff, it hits you right in the feels, I like things that make you feel, makes you think.
So, a couple of things I want to touch on before we wrap up. Y'all let me know if I'm forgetting anything we need to touch on. But let's talk about that conversation. We don't see a lot of Celebrimbor here. We see a little bit of Celebrimbor with Elrond. And it looks like the work with the dwarves is already going on. Looks like they're already building, all these things. And what do y'all think about Celebrimbor at this point?
I'm not quite sure yet.
Specifically, does it seem like he's already being played by someone?
That's where I'm kind of coming from. Is it seems like what started off as his great idea, this is what we should do, maybe was a thought put into his head already by Sauron, because just I think he's hiding something when it comes to Durin. It came across in a way that he knew something already, possibly. So, we're not seeing a great elf. I think we're seeing something, somewhat a little already swayed into the game.
And I'm curious, we see Durin the Third. We get that moment with Durin, which he looks incredible, by the way. But we get that moment. We get a cool moment with them where, because Durin is ready to go in there angry at his father, but Elrond calms him down before he goes in there. But Durin he thinks something's up too.
Right. Exactly. They have the same exact thing going on.
And I don't know at this point if it's just merely a distrust of the elves or if he's kind of has an idea that there's something else in play.
Yeah. Because he was like, what does your intuition tell you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And he had that talk during the second with Doran the Third about how when you're king, legend has it that all the voices of the past kings are with you. All of their thoughts, all of their mistakes, they're all with you. So, he kind of had that dad talk with him too. So I'm just loving where everything is going.
Yeah, no, I like that moment. They get to have this moment where the older Doran tells him, our people believe that when one of us becomes king, that the knowledge of all the kings before him flows into them. It's like, but you don't have to wait to hear my voice.
Right.
It almost makes you think that the Lion King stole that, Mufasa doing it.
I'm really liking a lot of what's happening here. Here's one thing though that I'm kind of not sure how I feel about. Going back to Numenor for a minute, I forgot to bring this up while we were talking there. So what do you think? Specifically, Dragon Buddy, the fact that Numenor doesn't appear to really have a standing army outside of their
right
Navy.
outside of the Navy. It's odd. Like I said, it's part of this whole being squished into timelines. I think has something to do with this. How I feel about Numenor. It's beautiful. It's great to see it. But the things that are going on are happening at different times in my head that I try to get them all straight into what's going on the screen. So it's kind of strange that we're only seeing that, they're sailors or, naval members. You don't see the fact that they're warriors other than, the people on the boats are wearing armor and some guards here and there, which, these boats that are going to eventually come full to Middle Earth. So we're not quite really seeing. I think it's going to be something that they're going to build on through this season, even a little more. And I'm hoping that we don't shift too quickly into a lot of the things that are coming.
See, I thought that Numenor, like the way they started this season off, I really thought that we would see Numenor fall this season, and now I don't. I think we may be season 3 or 4.
Right.
Before we see that happen, especially if they're going to fully flesh out that story.
Right.
So if they want to go with kind of the very abbreviated version of that story, they could do it this season. But if they want to do it right, it's going to have to wait a little while.
Yeah. Yep.
Which is fine. I want to see, like, I'm finding the Numenorian stuff really interesting. I'd like to see more of that.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that was probably the best way to describe that whole that rift within the two factions, what will become the two factions of Numenor, was to see it that, that jealousy in the elves be over a lot of different things, including, they do, if they pick up and start doing smith work, they don't need sleep, they don't need this. It's a good way to really sow the seeds within us as the viewer, that hatred or that jealousy that they have, but as well as really get all of the people in Numenor to really go over the top, which they end up doing in the books, to where it's crazy that the ideas that they got in their head, what we're going to go do, and where it goes from there.
I don't mind the fact they're building some animosity towards the elves.
Right.
With Numenor, because I think one really to build the wall between them and the Valar, you almost have to do that with the elves as well.
Right.
But I think that the walls that they're building there are interesting. My gut reaction was you said you weren't going to put modern politics in this. And then I thought about it for a little bit and was like, it's not really modern politics.
Right.
Yeah. It's like, that's me bringing something with me into it. That's me bringing the modern politics into it. It's an age old problem.
It's funny that you said it out that way. When we sat down and watched it, Kelly and my youngest and I, it was the first thing that popped in my head was Randy Marsh, and they took our jibs. And I'm like, I'm going to say that. And then you ended up saying, I'm like, I don't even have to say, okay, I'm not the only one that felt that way. Because it's exactly how it came off in the beginning.
Yeah, no, for sure.
But yeah, it becomes another one of those, devices to really show, that there's jealousy on every part of it.
Right. And it's just, there's a lot there because they have Galadriel and Muriel have the conversation about, where Galadriel says, if it wasn't for my people, you wouldn't have this island.
Right.
And Muriel says, well, we paid for it with the blood of our people. And the thing is, there's some truth in both stories.
Yes.
But then the whole story that Pharazôn spills about, our ancestors were the ones that vanquished Morgoth, and it's like, no, you didn't. I'm sorry.
No, you helped a lot and most of them died, but because they did, you were given.
It's like something. You definitely helped, but it was definitely the Noldor that cast down Morgoth when it was all said and done. But you were rewarded for helping, like that you were given this island, and but it's this idea of there's a lot of animosity towards the elves, and it's not just based on them taking their jobs.
Yeah,
right.
It's just that's one way to get people to get angry.
Oh yeah, in a market to get them all riled up.
And I fully believe that the guy that was doing that is working for Pharazôn.
Right. It only makes sense, just because of how he approached Halbrand right from the get-go. It seemed like that was placed there at that time in episode 3, for him to do that, to show like we need to get these people out of here because we don't want those that are on the fence to be swayed. And I think that's why the Queen brings in Elendil to talk to him. I think that was, probably pushed from Pharazôn to say, you might want to talk to him. His name does mean elf friend.
Right.
So,
I can't wait for Thursday already. Probably for Friday.
Right. No, that's really the thing. Like each time an episode ends, I'm just more and more anxious for the next one. And to me, that's the mark. That's when I know, I know the show's good. I know I like it. I might have nitpicks, but when one ends and I'm like, okay, I want the next one now.
Right.
Yeah.
That's when I'm willing to say, okay, I have some nitpicks, but I'm definitely going to call them nitpicks because otherwise I wouldn't be so excited for the next episode. I think the show, if you thought, I don't think the show's been bad at any point, but I think it definitely has turned the corner now and is just off to the races.
Yeah. I love a good fantasy, and this is it for me. This is better than Book of Boba Fett. Don't tell Ro.
She said
it. Don't tell Ro.
I mean, that's the thing. This has the potential to be one of the biggest shows ever.
Yes,
and that's what Amazon set out to create.
Oh.
And the thing is like for all the people that were determined that Amazon was going to destroy it from the beginning, I don't think Amazon, these companies ultimately, mostly, with maybe the exception of Lucasfilm sometimes, is always going to go to the money.
Right.
The most money here is in creating an accurate depiction of a Tolkien story.
Right.
I think they're doing that.
And I think that's what they're doing. I think that's their intention. I don't really care all that much what people have said off screen. I'm far more interested in what they put on it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. Like for me, if I was not going to watch stuff that had someone in it that has publicly said something I disagree with, I don't know what I would watch.
Right.
Like not much.
Right.
I mean, we have to on a realistic, view of things that most celebrities live a life that is completely devoid of anything real.
Yeah, they're totally insulated.
You know,
They don't understand real
it's
world.
that, I mean, it's, and some of them, it's not their fault to have that affluent, you know, kind of attitude when these aren't things you have to worry about. So I think when we started really listening to where people needed to hear what celebrities think and their opinions is when it all went wrong, because honestly, these people get paid to lie to us.
No,
and
we started listening. We started listening. The people started listening to the jester.
right.
As you know,
Right. And he made a point.
They're the entertainers. Like,
right.
When did we decide that the jester was the ruler? Like,
right. Right. No, and it's you have to look past these things, and yes, there's plenty of shows and examples out there where modern day politics are injected into storylines and stuff, and you take them with a grain of salt. But like I said, there's no overt way that I think that this is being done in this show. It doesn't come off that way at all to me, anyway. Of course, there's going to be parallels to real life. I mean, that's the point of these stories was based on, look at our history. History repeats itself, and
this is meant to be a history of this world too,
right?
Not just that; it's based in the Bible. It's so is ultimately Tolkien is just all about the human condition,
right?
Yeah,
in a lot of ways, and so we're going to see behaviors that reflect our own stuff. But you can go back and you can pull books from 100 years ago or movies from the 40s and 50s and find things. And if you put it in front of somebody today, they would say, with no point of reference of when it was made or written, and they would go, well, that's talking about this thing that happened last year. And you go, no.
Right.
It's because all those things, because human behavior is fairly constant,
and history repeats itself.
and stories like this have to tinge on a bit of the realism in all of us, in order for us to connect with it. So, yeah, exactly. Tom Cruise is batshit crazy, and Top Gun was pretty darn good. But and like I said, it doesn't come off as overly. I've seen the complaints over it, and I don't agree with it. I can see where people said it was boring in the beginning. There's some heavy world building that needed to get kind of done. I wasn't as bored with it, only because I am a fan of this.
Because I was watching for every little piece to be dropped in place, and so for me it was fascinating.
I was never bored with it. I don't know how people could get bored with it. I mean, like, first you have to introduce every race and where they live, and that's what episode 1 did. And let me know who they were.
I thought that it was slow. Like, I think that episode 1 is slow and feels a little clunky pacing wise. I don't know if there was some last minute edits or something that threw the pacing off. But everything, the other 3 episodes, the pacing's been great.
Definitely.
But that first episode is a little slow, but I was never bored during it.
Yeah, I really wasn't.
But like this episode 4, I watched it and I was like, there's no way that was an hour.
No.
It was over an hour.
Yeah.
Quick. It was quick.
Over an hour.
Yeah, because I mean, we got off here the other night with y'all and went straight in and watched it, and
yeah.
But yeah, it's you're talking about how people are insulated. This are insulated from the real world sometimes that are actors, and it just made me think about. Are y'all up on She-Hulk?
No,
I haven't.
I couldn't get into it.
Okay.
I watched episode 1 and I was like, it's not for me.
The jerk lawyer that she works with at the DA's office, there's a moment with him, and I think it's in the most recent episode. It was it's kind of one of those things that somebody in LA, and he makes a comment. He's like, $175,000 I spent on this car. And the other lawyer's like, there's a house in some parts of the country. And he said, And he says, "There's no way that's true."
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, that's kind of how a lot of lawyers look. I mean, a lot of actors look at things. I mean, a director Marisha was working on a movie with in Biloxi, Mississippi.
Yeah.
They were filming in this like super swanky, brand new subdivision down there. And it's nice, like big, nice houses, like 3,000 square foot houses.
Wow.
And he saw the price tag on it and bought one on the spot because he couldn't believe how cheap they were. It was like a $500,000 house.
Right.
And he was just like, really? I can buy that
That's
for
it?
that much? Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that house would have cost millions of dollars.
Right.
I try never to be jealous, but
and so he buys this house just on a whim because it's there. It's 3 blocks from the beach.
Right.
He already has a house.
Yeah.
Does he need another one?
So
damn.
People that live out there, and particularly actors, can definitely be insulated from the real world.
Right.
But is there anything that we haven't touched on? Like, I think we covered most things.
The only thing we didn't touch on was the elf Aaron that I never remember his name. Aaron Deer.
Yes.
Aaron Deer. Okay, I'll try to remember that. And Bronwyn, and when they're reunited, and they're finally at the Watchtower, and they're just staring at each other, and she just touches his arm, and it's like forbidden love again, and he gives her the message, and we're done. Yeah.
So I'm real curious where they're going. That is one of the places that they could go really kind of off track. I think that Tolkien's the relationships between men and elves. It's always been 3 occurrences. I mean, I don't guess that means you couldn't have another occurrence that's much lower profile. Those all involve very important, high-ranking elves and men. But I think that it's more likely that it's doomed to failure.
Yeah. And they're doing a really good job showing that it exists, but not making it the whole topic of conversation. Like, it's there.
Right.
But it's not what the topic is about. So I think they're doing a good idea with that.
Now, Ostirith was one of the early cities to fall to Sauron, wasn't it?
I believe so.
I think it just popped in my head. I'm like, oh yeah, Ostirith. There's a lot of cities with very close sounding names within that area. So
really,
but I think there's a lot. I think there's a lot to look forward to in this series, including we're going to get to see some really cool things built. We're going to get to see some really cool cities of men built, like Minas Tirith.
Minas Tirith, yeah.
We should see Orthanc, the building of Orthanc,
right?
And quite a few really cool pieces of Middle Earth that we should get to see. Now, probably not for a season or 2, but there's a lot of really cool stuff that's going to come in this series, and so I really hope that it stays on track. But like I said to start out tonight, I've liked this more with each episode.
Right. Yeah, same. Loving every bit of it.
Yeah.
I'm really curious to see how much of the shaping of Mordor we get to see throughout the series.
It looks like they're going to show us a lot of it, and I'm excited about that.
That is pretty cool. Basically seeing how they just twist the land and turn it into a poisoned place to be. So I'm very excited about that. Maybe Barad-dûr. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see where we're going. I am excited. I'm really liking the show. In fact, tonight we're going to get caught up on the other high fantasy, House of Dragon.
I've still got to start that one.
Yeah, we missed last week.
Missed last week.
I've been spending more time, like I said, digging into some unfinished tales, digging into the
Mhm.
Silmarillion. Like I said, I threw the video game in. The show has really got me hungry for Tolkien lore again. So
Yeah,
Me too.
the collection, the three black books right here,
right,
the full histories of Middle Earth.
right,
Like Marisha and I both keep coming here and pulling,
right.
and so there's
I
all
bet.
sorts of like note cards and things stuck on different pages because we've looked it up to market for future reference and
Right.
um, but now it's fun. I'm enjoying having something where I can watch it and then go on a deep dive into the lore after. And I think that's
Yeah.
what's going to be interesting is to see. I want to see how many copies. I want to see how much of an increase in sales of
Right.
Lord of the Rings and Silmarillion there
Well,
are.
I'm not going to buy it because DB owns like several copies of all of them.
Yeah, some of them are leather, some of them are from the 70s, some of them
As well
are
as
brand
picture
new.
books that we used to show the kids, they're
Absolutely.
under the fish tank. But yeah, I think I am going to grab your copy though of the Silmarillion and
Yeah. Small doses. Read in small doses.
Yeah. That's always the best way. Don't sit down thinking you're going to read the book cover to cover.
No.
Right.
Pick it up, pick a chapter and read it.
Yeah.
And,
Well, I know Tolkien's a hard read to begin with. I remember reading The Hobbit, the first two.
The narrator on the audio version that's on YouTube is actually really well done.
Oh, okay.
And it's just free.
Oh, I do have that queued up.
You mentioned that in the very beginning of the show that he read the first chapter. It's your favorite to listen to on the creation
The
of
Silmarillion. Yeah, that's in the Silmarillion.
Mm-hmm.
What was the name of the podcast though that did
Nerd of the Rings.
Nerd of the Rings.
Nerd of the Rings.
That was the one I was listening to the other day before our last show with you, Andrew. And Kelly's like, "What are you're going to give everything away?" I'm like, "No, I'm going over. Like, there's a lot of stuff that's in my head that I need to put. Like, I'm connecting the yarn on the wall, trying to figure it all out, but it's going out inside my mind." I said, "He's a good person to listen to because not only is he very knowledgeable, but the way he can kind of present it in audio form, perfect to be able to listen."
Nick, before we wrap up, Nick has asked a question here. Put it up here and then I'll move it. So how would you compare it to Wheel of Time and The Witcher? Because everybody's comparing it directly to House of Dragon just because they're running against each other.
I would never compare it to House of the Dragon. They're two totally different.
Yes and no.
So I'm curious because now, as far as The Witcher, I think The Witcher is very much a different genre of fantasy.
It is. And it's coming off of a video game. I mean, yes, they were books, short story books. But I think more of the game came through with the show.
But it's less high fantasy than House of the Dragon or Rings of Power. And so I like The Witcher. I like this better.
Absolutely. Wheel of Time, I loved the books as a kid. They were right up there, second to Tolkien, third to Tolkien. But the show, I could not get past how they brought in certain characters where they should not have been brought in that way. And it kind of ruins the story if it were to go further down the line. So comparing those two, I can't just because I can't bring myself to watch it. It didn't do the story justice as far as I was concerned. House of the Dragon makes sense only because Martin set out to create a world very similar in ways to Tolkien.
Yeah, he did. I mean, he borrowed a lot from Tolkien.
Oh, so much. I mean,
all fantasy post Tolkien really borrowed from Tolkien,
with the amount of content that Tolkien put out in his time. It's like YouTube, mass amounts of content.
He is the father of high fantasy.
Absolutely.
Like, he basically took what was the idea of fairy tales and built it into the what we know now as the fantasy genre.
Right.
And so it's hard not to, in some ways, emulate Tolkien. But what Lord of the Rings, I mean, not Lord of the Rings, the Game of Thrones stuff. Game of Thrones is literally the War of Roses
Yeah.
So look at the European history, look at the War of Roses, and wrap it in a Tolkien shell.
Right.
That's Game of Thrones.
Okay, yeah, I'll agree with that.
Yep.
I was thinking more like Game of Thrones is like the good and evil of men, and everything Tolkien is like God and the devil, and the people on Middle Earth are the people in between fighting the battle.
Yeah.
That's how it equates to in my head. Just because there's kings and queens in one and kings and queens in the other doesn't mean the one is like the other. You know, yeah, they both have dragons and stuff, but it's different.
Yeah. Tolkien kind of built something new where Martin really built on things that came before him. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's what he did. And so those are the two easiest to compare. I think that's why most people compare them. I have not watched or read Wheel of Time, so I would not be a good person to comment on that. But as far as The Witcher, The Witcher is a very different sort of fantasy, in my opinion. And I think this is telling an overall better story. I think if you're looking for blood, guts, and action, then The Witcher is your thing. But if you're looking for a more traditional high fantasy story where it's more about the story than the action, at least most of the time. Not that I don't think we're going to get some really epic battles.
Oh yeah.
In this stuff. I mean, we should get to see High King Gil-galad, who we've only seen so far in his golden robes, don his armor before this is over with.
Right.
So we're going to get to see a lot of really cool action in this as well, but it's still overall about the web that's being woven with the story. But so far, it's hard to judge a show 4 episodes in, but
we're kind of like mid-season now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would say at this point, it's in strong contention to be the best fantasy TV series ever made.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, Game of Thrones is the
wonderful
king of the mountain right now, but it failed in its final season. I mean, it is universally panned almost in its final season.
Well, there's reasons for that.
But I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, so I mean, the king of the mountain right now has major flaws. So I think that this is building something potentially really special. And like I've said, I know there are people that don't like it and people that will call me a shill or whatever for liking it. But the truth is that right now I'm really enjoying it. And if they cross a line and just absolutely do things that Tolkien wouldn't have gone for. I mean, there are some lines that if they were to cross, I will be right there with you condemning it.
Right.
Yeah, we bring out, Joe the elf and he starts constructing one of the elven rings. Then I'm going to have an issue, because that's a job already done by somebody that's in the show.
Yeah. So Joker, as far as being the best fantasy show ever made, I will say that based on the fact that there are very few good fantasy shows ever made. Very, very few. Fantasy is really entering its first golden age as a film and television medium genre. It has science fiction really up until Star Trek. Sci-fi was considered for children. And fantasy was as well. Well, fantasy didn't really break out of that mold until the Lord of the Rings films.
Right.
So much later. There's not a lot of good fantasy television. There are some fun shows, but they're truthfully not very good.
Right.
Or
they're flawed, like we talked with Game of Thrones, that you built a great show and then the last 2 seasons you wanted to get out to do other things, it feels like, because we spent all this time that winter was coming and then winter showed up and he was there for like three episodes.
I know.
When the 2 guys that were running Game of Thrones, they should have just moved on from them. They should have gotten somebody else to finish it. They checked out. They were ready to move on.
And sadly, because it was I was enjoying every minute of the show. It's kind of I accept it at the end, but the last season was just kind of rushed. And I'm hoping that we don't get that out of this. We get a nice slow burn going right now, and hopefully we can keep it.
Yeah. I think the difference is the biggest difference in between Tolkien and what's his name? Martin is TNA and lots of blood and gore. So if you want fantasy plus TNA plus blood and gore, go over to HBO. But if you want just the story, go over to Amazon.
Yeah.
Because it's amazing.
Yeah. So I can't wait to check out House of the Dragon. I'm planning on finally reading Game of Thrones this winter. I've never read them, but I'm finally at a place on my reading list where I think I can squeeze them in there. So
DB's read them over and over and over and over, and I got 3/4 of the way through the first book and said, "I have no time to read these."
Yeah, I liked the first book. I had a real hard time getting into the second book.
Yeah,
I started it 3 different times and never finished it, which is saying something because I read a lot.
Yeah.
And so anytime I've had the same problem with the High Republic stuff, the new Star Wars stuff, I keep starting books, I get halfway into one and then put it down and never pick it back up.
Right.
I just want to tell Joker Voice that I'm sorry you think it's boring, but not everybody thinks it's boring. And maybe there's some things that you're not picking up on, because episode 4 was anything but boring. Like, I was on the edge of my seat almost the entire hour.
Yeah, a lot of story there. And as far as your comment about allegory, Joker, we covered what could have potentially been meant as an allegorical parable early in the episode, and so we're an hour and 40 minutes into this stream, so I'm not going to rehash that.
Yeah.
But I will just say, so far, there's nothing in there without hearing it from the showrunners or the director's mouth. There's nothing in there that I'm willing to call allegory.
Yeah.
Same.
Just rewind this episode. You'll hear them.
All right, guys. Well, I think that's probably a good place to wrap up. I can't wait for episode 5. Thank y'all for coming. Thank you not just for coming, but for sticking around for an hour and 45 minutes.
Yay!
Awesome. I like talking Tolkien. So.
Oh yeah,
I do too.
Well, it's been great having y'all on, and so before we wrap up, let's everybody tell where you can be found on online. So your podcast, where you can be found on Twitter, whatever else you got going on. So Lunar Girl, I'll let you go first.
Well, you can always find me on the Sidebar Cantina media. I do the media for Dave and Jason, whose podcast is coming up tomorrow on Rogue One. They're going to recap that, get us all excited for Andor coming out on Wednesday. You can find them at the Sidebar Cantina, 5:30 tomorrow evening, Eastern time, I should say, on YouTube. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Discord, Facebook, you name it, we're there. You can also find me, I believe it's going to be this coming Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern on Stranger Things Has Happened, and we're going to be covering the season 1 finale. So yeah, excited to watch that one.
Good stuff.
Awesome. What about you, Dragon Buddy?
You can catch me on the Escape Pod every Wednesday night, 7:05. You can find us at, bio.link/ATSW the Escape Pod. You usually on Twitter. I was on all the socials, and then over the last most of the summer, I said I can't do it anymore. So you can find me on Twitter. Not in the feed much, because it's a cesspool of a hive of villainy in there, but it could be at dragon_bud. That's with 2 D's. You can find me on there, and like I said, Wednesday nights on YouTube, search ATSW the Escape Pod, and you can find me and Don Della Snooch and Brady Big Lovin', and we'll have a few drinks and we'll make fun of each other and say a bunch of inappropriate things.
All right. Let's see. I've got a lot of stuff here. So, first of all, you can find me running the Twitter account for this show at Sci_Fictionary. You can find our audio podcast, the Science Fictionary Podcast, and Coruscant Radio Underground anywhere that you listen to shows. We will be dropping a new episode of the Science Fictionary Podcast Tuesday. So just a couple more days, we'll have a new episode out. And Coruscant Radio Underground is making its return this week as well.
Yay!
A little later in the week.
Andor.
As well as stay tuned. I will be dropping in here a couple of times this week, hopefully with a couple of guests to talk about this year's Dragon Con.
Nice.
And
wish we lived closer.
it's awesome. If you ever get a chance to go, definitely do it. It is a really, it's different.
Yeah.
It's different than other conventions. We've got the Parsec Fan Award stuff going on right now.
Yes.
So I'm going to do a couple of live streams coming up where we're going to talk about that, and we will do a big live stream to announce the nominees this year. And the nominations have really started rolling in since we got the new way to get them up. So There's a link. It's a survey. You don't have to enter any information. You just go in, fill out your answers, and click enter, and I will have your nominations. The best way to find that from here, I will put a direct link in the description for this episode, but you can go to thesciencefictionary.com, and there is a direct link to the Parsec Fan Awards from the home screen. Everything is there. There's a list of categories. There's the introduction video, and the banner that if you click on that Parsec Award banner will take you directly into the survey. So really looking forward to getting that done. The only thing I haven't mentioned is go check out the Red 5 Network. A lot of podcasts, a lot of good stuff over there. You can find all kinds of different podcasts in the Red 5 Network now. When we started off, I think there were about 10 of us, and it was pretty much all Star Wars, and it has grown to be so much more than that.
Bro on Scare Scuttlebutt last night just announced the 40th Red 5 Network podcast just joined last night.
Definitely.
Yep. Yeah, I saw that. So it's a Star Trek podcast, right?
Yes.
It's a Star Trek podcast.
Podcast.
That's it. Okay. I couldn't remember because, it was
Make
Star
It
Trek
Snow.
talk, but-
Make
Rose
It Snow
doing
podcast.
Rose doing a Frozen podcast. Make It Snow.
We had some fun with that last night.
But yeah, you can check out the podcast that we're all part of, as well as everybody else that's in the Red 5 Network at Red 5 Network on Twitter. Are we still mostly using the bio link at the top, pinned to the top of the page, right?
We are bio.link/red5.
Yep. So definitely go check that out. Thank you to everybody that hung out in the chat. I think the people that actually hung out with us, I saw Hectolorian, Backyard TARDIS, and Joker Voice that hung out through the whole show. So thank you guys for showing up and hanging out in the chat. We always appreciate you, even when we have disagreements. We appreciate you being here. All right, guys. Well, that's going to do it for tonight's episode.
Thank you.
So until next time, may the Force be with you.
This podcast is a member of the Red 5 Network. For more Red 5 Network podcasts and content creators, visit bio.link/red5.